In this video, I'm going to show you how you can tan your very own deer hide, walking you through each step in the process from salting, pickling and tanning all the way through to drying and shaping the hide. So at the end of the video, you're left with a beautiful deer rug you can enjoy for the rest of your life. Timestamps are below that mark each step in the DIY deer tanning process if you want to jump ahead, otherwise let's get started. To tan your hide, you're going to need non-iodized salt, aluminium sulfate, chromium sulfate, fat liquor, a paintbrush, galvanized nails, a large board to tack and stretch your hide, a measuring jug, scales, sharp scissors, and a bucket. Now I'm going to assume that you've already skinned and fleshed your hide at this point. If you don't know what fleshing is the process of removing the excess meat and fat from the hide after you've skinned it. What you want is a clean hide with no fat or meat on it, preferably not even the skin's membrane. It should look something like this. Now, once you've got a clean deer hide, you might not yet be ready for the tanning process. If that's the case, you've got one of two options. First, you can freeze the hide, or you can salt it. In this example, I'm going to show you how to salt it. Simply pour out some salt onto your deer hide and start to cover the entire surface, rubbing it in as you go. Be sure not to miss the edges too. It's important that you don't use iodized salt either, as iodized salt can lead to hair loss on your hide. Once you've salted the hide, fold in the sides and roll it up like a rug, then placing it into your bucket. Personally, I then like to add some more salt to ensure that it's fully covered, but that's up to you. What you're really trying to do is dry out all the moisture from the skin, including any bacteria that's in the skin. Once you're done, you can set it aside and come back in a week's time. After 7 days, you're now ready to pickle the deer skin. Simply take the skin out of your bucket, shake off the salt, and then wash it thoroughly with water. You can then measure out your aluminium sulfate. How much you'll need is relative to how big your hide is. As a general rule, you'll need 25 grams of aluminium sulfate and 40 grams of non-iodized salt for every 1 liter of water required. You'll need enough water to completely cover your hide when it's in the bucket. Don't forget how much water you end up using, as this will be important later. In this example, I needed 4 liters of water, which means I need to use 100 grams of aluminium sulfate and 160 grams of salt. Measure out and add the aluminium sulfate and salt into your bucket, and then add your required measurement of water, making sure that your water is warm to help dissolve the chemicals. Once done, you can stir your pickling solution well and then put your skin into the bucket, ensuring that all the skin is completely covered and doesn't have any air bubbles trapped underneath. You'll need to make sure that you stir the solution and skin frequently, at least 2 times a day, each day for 7 days. After 7 days have passed, you can take your skin out, making sure that you drain as much of the pickling solution back into the bucket as possible. You can now add your chromium sulfate into the mix. So, for every 1 liter of pickling solution that you use, you need to measure out 15 grams of chromium sulfate. I used 4 liters, so I'm going to need 60 grams of chromium sulfate. Once you've measured it out, you then need to dissolve the chromium sulfate in warm water. Then you can add it to your pickling solution and give it a good stir. You can then place your skin back into the solution, making sure again that there are no air bubbles trapped underneath and that it's completely covered with the solution. If you're having troubles with the skin floating to the surface, you can weigh it down with some wood. Now you'll need to leave your skin for another 7 days, removing it every day to squeeze out the liquid back into the bucket and then place it back into the solution. After the 7 days, you can now take out your skin, hang it somewhere and give it a good wash with water using the hose. Then squeeze out all of the water from the skin and leave it to dry for a further 1 hour. It's at this point that you can then mend any bullet holes in your skin with a needle and thread. A lot of people don't do this, but personally I think you get a better product if you spend the extra 30 minutes sewing it up, or at least the large holes that you've made. With the holes now sewn up, you're ready to tack your hide to a large wooden board. You start by placing your hide skin up on the board. I've used a shipping pallet in this situation, although it's not really ideal. Starting at the bottom of the hide, start to nail down the edges, stretching them as far as they can go in the process. You'll want to make sure you keep the natural shape of the skin in mind, preserving the symmetry of the hide as you do this, because the shape in which it dries is the shape the hide will ultimately take. Once tacked down, you can now brush on your fat liquor. This is the process in which you replace the animal's natural oils that you've removed through the tanning process with new specialized oils that will keep your skin soft and prevent it from rotting. My rule of thumb is 1 cup or 250 ml of fat liquor for every 1 kilogram of wet skin weight. If you're not sure about how much to use, I think it's better to use more rather than less. An under-oiled hide will be stiff and never feel soft, whereas an over-oiled skin can be fixed later. Once measured out, simply brush the fat liquor all over the hide, making sure to cover the entire skin, including the edges. Now you can set your board with the tack skin aside, out of direct wind or sunlight, and leave it to dry. How long this takes really depends on your climate and weather. It could be hours, it could be a week. Just make sure you check it every so often and you'll be fine. Just before your skin is dry, when it's still slightly damp to the touch, you'll need to break in the hide. This is usually done by painstakingly stretching the skin over a round post and hitting it with a mallet, breaking the fibers apart. But I've got a better solution. Using a hand sander and 180 grit sandpaper, lightly sand the surface of your hide. Be sure to sand all the way to the edges of your hide, and if the nails come out due to the vibrations, simply hammer them back in again and keep going. You'll know when to stop when the surface is smooth and whitish in appearance. The last step in the process is trimming the hide. How much you trim is really up to you. It's really a trade-off between symmetry, shape, and size. Personally, I favor a larger hide with less symmetry over a smaller, more symmetrical hide, but it's your choice. Simply mark out your desired shape with a pencil and then remove all your nails. You can now use a pair of sharp scissors to trim the edges and shape your hide. And that's it. Your deer hide is now a deer rug. It's done, ready to be placed on the floor, a testament to both your hunting and newly developed DIY tanning skills. If you have any questions about the DIY deer hide tanning process, feel free to comment below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you're interested in watching more awesome hunting content, be sure to check out the rest of the videos on this channel. Otherwise, until then, happy hunting.